What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube with another edition of The Drive-In, where I watch recently released films and tell you guys whether they're worth watching, worth waiting for, or worth skipping altogether. This one is my most anticipated horror film, or film in general of 2022. When I looked at the calendar for the schedule for the horror releases this year, this one got me really, really excited, and that is because of who is behind it, and Jordan Peele. Those of you guys that have watched this channel for any length of time know that I love Jordan Peele. Everything he's touched for me has turned to gold. The guy seemed pretty infallible. I mean, I love Get Out. I love Us. I love his production work on Candyman. I love the reboot that he wrote and directed some of with Twilight Zone. I think everything he's done has been great. To me, Jordan Peele is, along with Mike Flanagan, my favorite horror directors of the modern era, kind of the 20 teens, 2020s. I've loved the work that Flanagan and Peele have done. I think Peele's blend of comedy and horror has been great. The societal statements have been great. He's got something to say with his movies. They're original. He's clearly a fan. He's got homages without compromising the integrity of the new vision. I love what Peele has done, so I was very, very excited to see this. I saw this film last night at the premiere of Nope, which is what we're talking about today. And stayed up late last night, came home, and stayed up watching other reviews and stuff like that. I usually record my review first, but I saw the movie, I talked about it with my friend who I saw it with, I took my notes, I gave my opinion, and then afterwards I watched reviews. We'll get into the reasons why I watched the reviews before I recorded this. But I woke up super early today, in spite of having stuff to do, because I wanted to get this review out because I have a lot to say about this movie. Nope was written and directed by Jordan Peele, starring Daniel Kaluuya as OJ and Kiki Palmer as Emerald. And the essential plot of this story is that two horse wranglers, two horse trainers who run a training business to train their horses for professional film sets kind of fall on hard times after the loss of a loved one and kind of have to reunite and kind of help patch their severed bonds as they come across a paranormal entity, some kind of, it says, I think, in the trailer, some kind of unidentified flying object that they're trying to survive together. Again, this is going to be spoiler free, so a lot of these terms are going to have to be vague. I'm going to try and talk very specifics without ruining any of the plot for anybody. And whereas I've been universally positive on Jordan Peele in my previous reviews, I've got pros and cons for this one, so I'm going to get into those. The first thing I have written down in pros, we're going to start positive, obviously. The first pro I have written down here is framing. The framing of some of these shots is among the best framing that I've seen in modern day, and maybe among ever. The framing of this stuff is great. They're just like, this goes along with other points, but object permanence. I love the way shots are set up. You get so much depth of field in some of these shots that in general, my biggest note in the positive is cinematography in this thing is absolutely phenomenal. This is Spielbergian to me. I know people have compared this to Jaws. I can see the comparisons. This feels like a summer blockbuster movie where all the shots and all the depth of field is larger than life. The action movie elements of this film are done very, very well because of how good Jordan Peele and the DPs are at creating these shots. This feels like way more than a horror movie. This feels like more than a movie. It is a journey. You see in the framing, they get 3 or 4 different images at different times, and you're looking for everything. Everything feels in focus, and even on different planes, different levels of field, everything seems to matter. There are static shots that sit like if you have a character's reaction, and then you have a paranormal thing going on in the background. You have some kind of weather event happening where there are objects in the foreground. Everything on screen seems to take up a lot of space evenly, and everything seems to matter. The framing of the shots have you looking at them and going, oh, they should hold on this shot a little longer. This looks really cool. And you're lost in the imagery. And a lot of times we don't get that anymore as, watching this as filmmakers or as journalists. We don't get to just sit with long shots and appreciate what the shots are. And in this film, there are so many times where there's an object here and an object slightly behind it and a character's reaction over here and something happening up in the sky up here, and you see everything, and everything in the shot matters. So you're lingering on these shots and you're feeling tense and you're wondering what's going to move or what's going to jump or what's going to happen, and you're looking around appreciating all these different things in these shots where we usually don't get that in modern film. So I really appreciated the framing. Again, to kind of expand on the object permanence aspect. This is the kind of film you can watch more than once because you want to look at those shots and see everything you might have missed. You want to see twitches in the sky. You want to see dripping of blood somewhere. You want to see a character's reaction change. You want to see what they're looking at. And it not only puts you in an aspect of appreciating all of the objects and coloring and things on screen, but it puts you in the character's POV a lot, where you kind of feel tense with them. So you're kind of waiting for what's going to move while also appreciating it. Another note goes along with the shooting style again, and that's pan shots. Pans are really important in horror and can be used to hide shadows, to hide killers behind objects, stuff like that. Stuff like that. Sorry for the breathing issue. I'm in a hot ass room. But the pan shots in this film are phenomenal. We get a lot of throwback shots, which reminds me for my biggest homages. I saw a lot of like Close Encounters. I saw a lot of Jaws comparisons. What this film reminds me of in the positive way is the homages that it pays to 50s and 60s like sci-fi horror. And Jordan Peele did this before with Us. When he did Us, it kind of reminded me of Village of the Damned or Children of the Damned and like Pod People Taking Over kind of movie. Whereas this movie reminds me of the old creature features, the old classic drive-in, 12 o'clock at night, 1 in the morning shows with Svengoolie and stuff and Joe Bob and stuff you would turn on where you get like It Came from Outer Space and The Thing from Another World. I love those first original black and white sci-fi creature feature alien takeover kind of movies. And this reminds me of those, not just in kind of parts of the plot that I'm not going to give away, but more so in the shooting style. You have these pan shots where they do long takes, but it's not just long takes with like slow dolly down a hallway, and it's not just long takes on like a static actor's reaction. The long takes are, okay, the camera's going to come here, the character's going to run. Now we're going to pan up to the sky. Now we're going to go over to the side and see what's behind him. Now we're going to go back to the character. Now we're going to pan up. Now we're going to see a glimpse of something. Now we're going to, now we're going to come back down. The camera pans are very unnatural in an unnerving way in this. A lot of times when a camera pans, it's for comedic effect or it's done in a cheesy way, in a low budget way. This has the low budget charm of those pans and that shooting style while being a very high budget, beautiful cinematic masterpiece. And I say that in full reverence. Cinematically, this film is near perfect in terms of the different styles and things you're seeing on screen. That is such a strength. And those pans are done not only to, again, put us in the character's POV and make us feel tension because we're waiting to see what's going to happen and what's going to pop out, but it protects, in the first half of the movie, it protects the antagonist. When you have a supernatural antagonist, how much you show of it and how much you expose of it keeps it scary for the audience. In the first half of this movie, especially with those unique pan shots that are throwbacks, it shows you bits and pieces quickly of the antagonist, just enough to make you intrigued and make you scared, and it builds the tension, which is a masterful part of this film, especially in the first half. Next up, sound design. Jordan Peele has this thing he does. He has a particular style with his sound design. You hear it in all of his trailers. You hear it in all the previews he does. He has this violin strike, this little like almost Psycho-esque strike, like violin strike, where these low notes are violently hitting and peaking at the right times when something is on screen or a character is devolving into madness. And he uses those here. Those little violent low note sounds are done very well here to build tension and to put you in the environment and give you chills and make you feel like you're submerged in the movie. And he also does this thing, he continues the tradition here, where he takes a very upbeat, popular song that could be considered funny or just like overly exposed or well known, and he slows it down. He slows the song down to an eerie beat. And it turns this upbeat pop culture song into something very slow and like non-melodic and deep and dark, and the tones are dark. Everything gets really dulcet in a creepy way. And that is one of Jordan Peele's staples in his sound design, and he does that again here very, very well. Also acting. Acting here is great. Daniel Kaluuya as OJ is wonderful. He's the demure, kind of quiet, always inward thinking, always kind of to himself, traumatized by a loss in his life. You can see the scars on him from just his facial expressions. He's quiet, he says few words. When he does use any kind of comedy, his comedy hits the most in this film. When he is quiet, you're wondering what he's thinking or you're feeling his pain, which is a great sign of a great actor. Kiki Palmer is one of the standouts here as the Sister Emerald. She's the charismatic, over the top, lots of personality, lots of charisma, draws you to the screen, has some funny lines, breaks up the brother-sister pairing with her kind of irresponsible but fun personality, and she's great in this, man. The acting is good. Yeun is in this from The Walking Dead and from Mayhem. He plays a really fun character, kind of a carnival barker who's been through stuff like this before. He does a nice job, although I wish he had more screen time and a little more story arc, in my opinion. We'll get to that. But everyone in this film does a really, really nice job in their roles. Homages, like I said, Jordan Peele pays a lot of homages, not just in his societal conversation about filmmakers, which I liked. He kind of had some good things to say about crew and the search for fame and kind of being on film sets. Those were nice little in-nods there. And obviously, like I said, the homages to the summer blockbusters and to the 50s, 60s sci-fi, which I really enjoy. It's my favorite sci-fi, and there were good peaks of that in here. Also, the way the villain or the antagonist was protected in the first half of the movie was really, really good. So you say, okay, you're giving all this technical love to this. You're talking about some good writing. You're talking about sound design and camera and direction. All those things were really, really good. So where are the cons? But here we go. Con time coming up. My number one con here is what I call the misuse of Chekhov's gun. There's an old rule in theater and film, especially in theater, that if you see something on screen, especially prominently or especially early on, that you have to kind of see it again in the resolution. You have to figure out why it's there and what it's being used for, and it has to factor in to the long-term stakes of the film. These don't do that here. The subplots are not being used in a way that does any kind of finality or any kind of consistency to them. We see a couple things on screen. There's a little subplot we see that involves a monkey, is all I'll say. We see that. It feels important. It feels big and eerie and scary and weird, and it gets you drawn in. And then maybe we don't see it enough in the end. It's brought up several times, and it's seen imagery-wise several times, and it looks great, and it's cool. But where is it actually being used in terms of the connection to the film? It could have been probably cut out, and it wouldn't have hurt the film at all. In fact, we'll get to that. But there are other images on screen during TV shows that we see and kind of don't see again. There are looks from certain actors that kind of talk about bigger themes. Certain actors give certain lines or certain looks that make you go, oh, this person knows more than we think they know, and we don't see it again. A person has a particular backstory that doesn't really factor in the long term to the end of the movie. There are all these things that are brought up, and it feels to me like a misdirection where this film doesn't necessarily know what it wants to be. Blending of genres is great, and there's times that it's done very well here, but it's part horror, part thriller, part almost western, part almost action. It's all these things, and that's fine, but it feels like those tones feel very different to me. They don't really blend all that great like Jordan Peele stuff usually does. There are things that are seen on screen 3 or 4 different times that are talked about consistently that really have no bearing, aside from making a quick statement or having a cool visual. They don't factor in. There are characters that have motives that we don't see the end of. There are characters that are going for certain dreams that we don't see the end of. There are, just so many different things that you're kind of wondering why, how's this going to connect? I'm so interested in kind of the end of this story, and it's not really there for anything meaningful. And it feels like the movie doesn't know what direction it wants to take, where any one of these subplots could be very interesting as a whole movie itself, or a short film, or whatever. But when they're all blended together and they're not used effectively, it makes you feel like they're just using it to pad runtime, and it makes you feel like you're watching parts of this movie for no reason. And that's kind of what hurt me on this. Rules not being consistent. Anytime you have any kind of paranormal, I'll be careful here not to spoil anything. Anytime you have like paranormal stuff, it's really important that the rules are established. Yeah, it's meant to be a crazy Twilight Zone style world inside of this real life situation, which makes it a horror film and a sci-fi film and all that. But you have to establish the rules kind of okay, here's when this thing comes. Here's why this happens, which you can kind of choose to leave out or not the why. But here's when this thing comes. Here's the timing of it. Here's the things you can do to try and beat it. Here's the things that it does to beat you, and kind of establish those things. And to a degree, they do those things. But then later on in the film, you're left going, wait a minute. Why did this antagonist attack this thing and not this thing? Why did the antagonist affect this thing a certain way and not this thing? Those are not used as plot devices. Those are just never explained. There's just certain things that are very inconsistent where you go, oh, they never explained the connection to this character. Oh, they never explained this animal acting this way and this animal acting this way. Stuff like that. These things happen and it feels more like a plot hole than it does a mystery. I know sometimes directors like to show and not tell and leave you guessing for yourself, and Jordan Peele likes to have you take away whatever you want to take away from it, and I took a lot away from this in a positive way. But in this one, I was left going, oh, this object reacted differently in this time than it did this time. Why is that? And it was never explained, and it kind of felt like they missed something there where a couple simple lines, one character kind of giving its backstory, or a couple simple lines could have solved that. You could have taken 20 seconds and connected that stuff just like you could have with the plot devices that I spoke about earlier. Another thing is antagonist being overexposed. In the first half of this film, like I said, with those pan shots and the object shots, the antagonist was shown just enough where it was, oh, where's it coming from? Where's the speed? Where's it going to pop out from? It looks really creepy. It looks really unique. It doesn't look fake. All this stuff. Really well shot, cleverly, in a way that enhanced the cinematography and the characters we were staying with in the story, which was great. In the second half of the movie, I feel the antagonist is very, very overexposed. We see way too much. When we're seeing something on screen, if it's used sparingly, it's done for pure terror and pure mystery. When that thing is overexposed, whether it be a slasher villain, whether it be an alien, whether it be an animal, whatever it is, the more you see it, the more you kind of see holes in how it's made. You see CGI aspects, you see kind of building aspects, you overexpose it. It takes away the fear and makes it either mundane or comedic. In this case, I would say bits of both, but more so mundane in the second half of the film. The first half built it up so well, and the second half just did not protect it well enough for me, where I was kind of like, all right, we've seen it before. Now it's not really scary anymore, especially at the angles that it goes to expose it. And then the antagonist, I feel like, just like with the plot devices, wasn't really consistent. I don't feel like the things we saw imagery-wise were beautiful. The imagery looked great. It looked grand and larger than life and grandiose and ambitious and all of that, but it didn't really hit its mark because it didn't stay consistent. And some of the things that were trying to foil it didn't feel consistent and felt a little overexposed and felt a little comedic as well. So you had overexposed and somewhat comedic and somewhat changing, while the rules were changing on both sides of the protagonist and the antagonist, and that took away a lot of the fear of what this thing was and why it's here, in my opinion. Second half pacing. The second half pacing really threw me off. This movie is 2 hours and 11 minutes, and to me it feels every bit of 2 hours and 11 minutes. First half of the movie was flying by, and I was like, oh my god, is it over already? We got to that second half, or maybe even just the last third, and it felt like it was going way too long. I started feeling tired. I started losing a bit of interest in some of the scenes. I started getting tired on that last edge when the second half of the movie is kind of action-based and a lot of the physicality is ramped up. You're supposed to get fully engaged. And I saw a lot of the reviewers on YouTube say the second half was way better than the first because they were tired in the first half and they got engaged in the second half. I was the opposite. I was engaged because of the story and the characters in the first half, and by the second half, I was like, oh, we're doing these same shots again? Okay, like, I thought this was going to end now. Like, they're kind of trying to keep it going to make you think it's not going to end, or make you think it is and then it doesn't end. And by the second half, I was tired. The pacing had the opposite effect on me that it did on most of the other reviewers that I saw. And it just, to me, like I said, by the end, I was kind of more disinterested until the final act, and then once that hit, I was left a little bit underwhelmed with the ending. But another note that goes along with the second half pacing is repeated story beats. I say this a lot with longer films because I tend to like the hour and a half to an hour and 40-minute kind of movies more than I do the hour 55, 2 hours, 210, stuff like that. I like shorter movies comparatively. I'll watch longer ones as long as they grip you, but I feel like in this movie, if they had cut a few of those subplots out, or they had not gone back to those some of those same shots as much with different backgrounds and different subplots, if they had cut those out, not only would it have made the story make more sense because you're eliminating side stories and you're focusing more on your main story, but it would have taken 20 minutes out of the film and would have paced it a lot better. Also, in the second half, some of the same shots kind of happen over and over again. They linger on the characters for so long, and they're trying to get you to connect, but they've already shown these shots before. So they go to a shot, they go back to another reaction, they go to a object shot, and then go back to the characters again. And you're going, okay, the shot's going on for a long time. I get the dramatic effect, I get that the implications are there, but it's taking so long, it's repeating the same shots over and over again, where it starts to wear on you. If they had cut down on those repeated shots and cut down on those directionless subplots that made me angry in the end because they didn't come back to have any relevance to the story, they could have paced this way better, saved a lot of the aggravation and wonderment of the audience about where this thing comes in at, and they could have really made a great hour and 45 or an hour and 40-minute film that could have been all killer and no filler. Instead, a lot of these long shots, just like the subplots, felt more like filler and padded runtime than they did actual story beats. So that really hurt it to me. So what we're left with is a Jordan Peele film that is original, it is ambitious, it pays homage to classics while making its own path. It is cinematically one of the greatest things I've seen in a long time. It is shot like a Spielberg blockbuster. It is technically genius in terms of the sound and the shots and the objects and the props and the locations and the acting. All that stuff is very, very strong. The technical aspects are directed well. The story is directed well. But we're left with a story that, because it went a little bit long, it got lost in subplots and kind of lost its focus a lot of times, and then had a hard time getting to the finale. And once it got to its finale, I was underwhelmed with the resolution of the characters and kind of the final rationale, reasoning, exposure, visual of what the antagonist was. So I think hiding the antagonist a little better and giving the protagonist a little more direct result, a little more direct ending, and shaving this down 20 minutes would have really helped in terms of pacing and in terms of story. But I think we got something that really, really aimed for a high mark and cinematically hit those marks 1,000 times over, but story-wise and resolution-wise fell short for me. So for the first time, I can't give this mark too low. I've been debating this number for a while. But I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10. I think cinematically and story originality-wise, it is way, way too good and too different and too counterculture and too fun in its premise and too good for the first half to give a really bad rating to. But it's a tale of two movies, and in the second half, it just loses some of that vision. The creativity's still there and the cool shots are still there, but it goes on too long. It loses focus of what it wants to be, and it doesn't incorporate the story plots and the villain in such a way that keep you scared and keep you guessing. It leaves you kind of wondering and leaves you feeling a little bit overexposed. So I can't give this lower than a 5 because of how beautiful it is, but I can't give it higher than a 5 because I wasn't thrilled with the story beats that did not come back to pay off in the end of the movie. So, love Jordan Peele, huge fan of all of his other stuff. Really good points in this, but it fell short for me. It's not going to be in my top 10 at the end of the year. That's a big, big disappointment for me, loving Jordan Peele as much as I do. What did you guys think? Am I overanalyzing this? Are my director slash journalist slash YouTuber things coming in to play too much? Is my writing background hurting me in this sense? Are there anything that I missed? That's why I stayed up to watch those reviews, to make sure I didn't miss any of those subplots connecting that might have been too subtle for me or too nuanced. And I didn't see anything. So what do you guys think? Did I miss anything? Am I being too hard on this? Did you love or hate this movie? Please tell me in the comments down below what you thought of Jordan Peele's Nope and what you want to see him direct in the future. And if you want to see more of these drive-in videos where I do recently released horror films, please tell me in the comments what you'd like me to watch so I can do those in the future. Take care, guys. Stay scared, and I will see you guys next time.